we're wrapping up what has been a wonderful day with a discussion perhaps that ties it all together in terms of sectors. An argument that was made quite early on was the fact that collaboration will be key to achieving any goal, let alone unlocking the potential of a enormous continent with the combination, of course, of 1.3 billion people. And so the conversation is going to focus on sectors from technology, from energy, and manufacturing. In part, as we do look at how to achieve or how to implement multi-sector strategies to achieve excellence across the energy and also the economic stratosphere, as it were. So allow me to introduce you to the panelists who will be joining me in this discussion, beginning with Mr. James McKay. He's the CEO of the Energy Council of South Africa, driving the roadmap in part for a just and sustainable energy transition. James is here. Could I just also ask the speakers to ensure that they sit right by their picture? We don't want any misrepresentation of any speakers on stage. We do have Mr. Imran Mula as well, CEO of Sunny Sixt, Pioneer in Smart Mobility Solutions, redefining how Africa moves. Mr. David Ndelwa, he moved. Okay, Mr. David Ndelwa, CEO of the Simba Group, scaling transformative businesses across energy, telecoms, and agriculture, as well as Mr. Bob Meng, Managing Director of Digital Power at Huawei, South Africa, forefront of deploying digital energy infrastructure across the region. And of course, gentlemen, you have me, because Bongani being the lead MC of this conference, managed to avoid the graveyard shift, but I certainly look forward to hearing what you have to say. James, perhaps we begin with you when we do talk about energy right now. There's been a whole lot that has been said about energy, from the point that it is still lacking in its full capacity, with 600 million and then some Africans are still without access to reliable power. But we also heard from the CEO of the Development Bank of Southern Africa a little earlier about how much activity there has been in the private sector space, particularly when it comes to renewable energy in participating further in the space. So how would you characterize what is going on in Africa's energy landscape right now, and anything that can be done to improve confidence in your view?
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think definitely there have been some very positive shifts. If we look at it in the South Africa context, from 23 to where we are now, it's been quite a phenomenal ride, very positive. I recently participated in a World Energy Council International Advisory Group, and out of Europe, a bit of the narrative around Africa was actually that Africa is coming out of its paralysis. It is seen as attractive as investment, but investment is not integrated, it's not at speed, it's not at scale. So I think that the important reference here is global politics and geopolitics is hugely topsy-turvy, with wars, trade wars, real wars going on. And in that context, what is happening in the energy space? Well, demand is actually consistently exponentially growing. EU is projecting a 60% electrification demand growth over the next 10 years based on transport and industrial pivots. China builds more wind and solar than the rest of the world combined every year. Global investment in clean tech tops $1.5 trillion a year. So in the Africa context, we just struggle with relevance. So I think I attended the earlier session on AI. I think this is also another issue where we talk about the 600 million Africans who don't have access to electricity, yet AI is very rapidly becoming the next utility. And we also the professor spoke about sort of AI sovereignty and control of information. And yet AI is a huge consumer of needs cheap, baseload, reliable energy. So if we are already behind in terms of electricity and access, we are a rounding error in the global demand and pace of investment. We're not a leader in the clean tech space, and we're now facing a further wave that 90% of data centers are actually controlled through the US and China. South Africa is the only country that has a data center in Africa. So I think the pressure is on. We do have pockets of excellence. I think we've seen huge and rapid movement in South Africa, in East Africa, but what we've also heard and is relevant is we've got generation which is stranded in Africa because we don't have regional markets. Interconnected grids are not available, and we have rather weak regulatory and kind of policy coherence space. So I think these are things that we have to deal with, and then I think that there clearly is huge demand upside potential for Africa if one takes the need to match the 600 million people, plus the move into AI, which Africa will eventually get into. But we've got to move fast, and I think that's where the opportunity lies.
So I like your analogy in terms of we are coming out of paralysis. So there's a perception that we're coming out of paralysis. So when I think about that, what that looks like in terms of a physical human being, that physical human being won't necessarily just get up and start running or springing, jumping up and down, as it were. There will be steps that will need to be taken to develop that level of strength. So you mentioned a few areas of challenge, and I hear and I concur, but I suppose I put it back to you as well, in terms of the steps that can be taken towards absolute proficiency in walking the road, as it were, or running or springing up in this energy ecosystem.
Well, South Africa, we've done incredibly well out from the load shedding crisis, which prompted a very collaborative, and there was earlier on we were talking about collaboration, I think, in your opening. We don't have the state institutions and capacity in the state to move at the pace and complexity required. So I would say the first thing we have to do is really capacitate the state, and I think that there's good international and donor appetite to support good regulations, good policy environment, and well-capacitated state institutions like our regulator, like our departments. The next thing is we just have to build a lot more grid. Now, again, we are competing with the rest of the world. The UK is targeting to build more grid in the next 5 years than they've built in the last 30 years. So we're not the only ones trying to build grid, and so this is going to, again, be competing for resources, for skills, for capital. But we've got to build a lot more grid, and we've got to be a lot quicker at it. And then the last thing is we do need markets. We have an affordability constraint across Africa. In South Africa, we're seeing this becoming a bigger and bigger societal challenge. We see municipal debt rising. Part of the way to address that is through markets. Markets forces transparency, competition, it drives efficiency, it creates price discovery in order to create investor confidence. So I think regional markets, we must move on those. In South Africa, we are targeting the launch of the wholesale energy market next year in April. I think it's progressing incredibly well, but there is a lot that needs to be done. We have a South African power pool. We need to link those up and create a Southern Africa wholesale market. If we can then create the regional connectors around grid, expand our grid, and then I think expanding capacity in the state institutions, those are the building blocks that really will start moving towards success, which is speed and scale. We know what needs to be done, but achieving speed and scale is a real challenge.
Okay. We'll come back and add on to those points in the next round of questions. Imran, to bring it back to you just to speak about the automotive sector. Interesting sector, evolving sector. I think when you talk about it, specifically in the context of what is happening in Gauteng and the Tshwane Special Economic Zone, it's just one of those sectors that are in many parts heralded as success. There is an element of, in fact, a strong element that has of partnership that has been established between the public sector as well as the original equipment manufacturers, and there were plans, in my view, to do a little bit more. But how would you characterize the state of your sector right now and its ability right now to perhaps attract further investments and also activity within the players that are already in the market?
Yeah. First off, thank you very much, Standard Bank and everyone, for the invitation to be part of this panel. And I think any automotive manufacturer, when looking at a market, needs to first assess the demand and understanding whether South Africa or Africa can sustain more automotive manufacturers coming in. So let's look a bit backwards. In South Africa, last year alone, sold around 500,000 new vehicles in our market. And that accounts for around 50% of Africa's total sales. Now, to put that into a bit of context, the car park, that's the total number of vehicles operating, new or used in South Africa, is around 10 million vehicles. Comparatively, South Africa, compared to Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, our 5 neighbors, collectively their car park is around 1 million vehicles. So South Africa is much bigger, and South Africa sells, those countries combined sell around 30,000 new vehicles every year. But the biggest difference is that our automotive manufacturers in South Africa have a bit of protection where a third party cannot import a vehicle into South Africa that's already homologated for our roads, whereas our neighbors don't have that protection. So you have the influx of used Japanese vehicles being sold into those markets, and it exceeds the amount of new vehicles sold in those countries, around 50,000 used Japanese compared to 30,000 new cars. So the demand in South Africa is there, and there's already a bit of an established network of dealers in South Africa. And then you have to look at the manufacturing and the infrastructural advantages of operating in South Africa and some of the logistics. South Africa already manufactures around 750,000 vehicles annually. And 250,000 are sold into the South African market, and 500,000 are exported. And these export plants come in 2 forms. You mentioned some in the Pretoria area. Those would be what we call a CKD, a complete knockdown facility, and then you get the SKD facilities, which are semi-knockdown facilities. So the likes of Hyundai and Mahindra would have an SKD facility that only assembles a kit of vehicles, and that's for their light commercial vehicles, and they get some exemptions on duties when they do that. But the bigger part is the CKD facilities. And there you have the bigger players, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Toyota, VW, and Nissan, that manufactures that vehicle locally, and they try their best to source those components locally. And there you have the saving of the import duty complete. Now, that coupled with a relatively lower labor cost already makes it quite attractive for new automakers to come in. And then you have the logistics, which are our corridors that exist already, the Maputo corridor linking us to Mozambique, the Trans-Kalahari corridor linking South Africa to Namibia and Botswana, and the north-south linking to DRC via Zambia. So it's already quite established today. And then you already have the government playing their part in this entire process, where you have the APDP, the Automotive Production and Development Program, which incentivizes these global manufacturers to localize their production. But the result of all of this is that since 2018, our CKD manufacturers have invested a further 60 billion rand into existing infrastructure. So there is a winning formula, it's working. But you might ask then, where's the opportunity? Why would a new player come in?
Sure.
And today already, of the 500,000 new vehicles sold, half of them, 250,000 vehicles, are imported out of China and India and manufactured there. Now, the reason for that is that those vehicles attract a lower income customer. They're on the lower end of the scale. And our CKD manufacturers today, Nissan builds the Navara, BMW builds the X3, Mercedes-Benz builds a C-Class. None of them have really gone into the right segment. They're building the higher end vehicles which get exported. So if these Chinese and Indian manufacturers can set up their facilities locally, saving on the import duties, they'll be able to have that 250,000 sales plus more, because you're going to now move into the new car sales as well and the used car vehicles. And it's already happening, right? You see Stellantis, it's a major European brand that represents European automotive brands and American.
There's a Porsche, I think.
No, Stellantis represents Peugeot, Opel, GM, Citroën.
What's their fast car? They've got a fast car.
Maserati.
There you go. Okay.
Yes. And they already are working with the IDC and a few Chinese brands already, the BAIC, SAIC, and Geely, to set up their manufacturing in South Africa. Whether it will be in the form of SKD, CKD, it's still to be seen, but it's already happening.
Sure. The question I wanted to say is that if, I think most people in the room would have traveled the continent, and what stands out to me when I do travel the continent is seeing makes of cars that are, first of all, quite old, and second of all, makes of cars that didn't even hit the South African market from my recollection. I know I tend to have a bad memory, but I am pretty sure that a lot of those makes, and I won't mention specific brands, never even hit South Africa. And I'm alluding to something that the industry is calling dumping of cars. And so you look at what's happening in the US right now, and the tariff that has been placed on the industry in the current administration's hopes and desires for a lot more manufacturing to be set up in the US. They're doing it via the tariff route to encourage it. You spoke about what a player like Stellantis is doing right now, and you also spoke about the opportunity potentially for players in India and BRICS who serve a market that is not being served by the existing players who are manufacturing right now to perhaps do a little bit more here. So then my question to you, Imran, becomes what needs to happen to encourage such activity, to manufacturing activity of a lot more production in the automotive sector here from a policy standpoint, from an incentive standpoint, because something tells me that the diplomatic approach of our administration is not going to, throw down the tariff hammer.
Yeah, I think before I get to South Africa, if you look at the region around South Africa, there has been attempts to set up these type of facilities in our neighboring countries. And it's never gotten to a point where it worked. Namibia has tried it, Botswana has tried it, and those facilities had to close down because there wasn't enough support from a government point of view. Now, South Africa, it's tried and tested. This has been operating for the last 20 or 30 years, manufacturing vehicles here already. And it's the Chinese movement is happening, whether we like it or not. The traditional brands, call it the older brands, they haven't been able to keep up with the South African demand. I mean, we heard it just now, the local pocket is under pressure. So I think this is going to happen naturally over time as we go along, because the Chinese and Indian manufacturers will see the demand, the opportunity, and need to localize some sort of manufacturing. And already we've seen the engagement of some of the Chinese brands to take over existing facilities that are under capacity in South Africa already. I think we might start seeing some JVs between different brands, but it's going to be difficult to see over the next couple of years what changes, because you mentioned these brands that you've never seen, if you've never heard of.
Yeah.
China has 150 local brands. We've only seen about 20. The Australian market has over 70 Chinese brands already. So some are backed by government, some are not. So it's still very early to see who's going to survive and who's not going to.
Sure.
But it's going to take a bit of time before we get to that stability.
Sure. And I think that what also stands out with the popularity of a lot of these Chinese and Indian car brands right now is the technology that is included within them, and the technology that they're able to offer to the client at a price point that is more agreeable with the pocket. And so, David, I want to talk to you about technology specifically and the integration of technology and data specifically in improving efficiency and scale production. Sir, how do you see it?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me as on this panel and obviously contributing to one of these hot discussions that we should have when we're actually changing the narrative and to unlock Africa. Basically, when you're looking at agribusiness and production large, out of the population we're discussing in Africa, 1.3 billion people, and economy value of around $3 trillion. Agri and its entire value chain, I believe I don't have the right percentage in terms of what it takes on the agri side, but it should be I presume should be more than 60% of the entire economy of Africa. So agriculture is actually very important, and the use of data and information and how these two can be integrated, it's quite critical. The good part of it is that we have a very young population in which we can adopt these methodologies, for example, in terms of more accurate farming technologies that are available at the global stage at the moment. Basically adopting what are the best practices that are happening elsewhere and then bring back in Africa and integrate it within our environment. In the afternoon session, we discussed a lot about AI and Internet of Things, how it can help to transform the agribusiness value chain to increase efficiency, as you have said. So what I see is that we should see this collaborative approach between the government sector and the private sector into enhancing these issues to the players at large, but also looking into other aspects like digital economy in terms of how can we now get information in terms of market information availability of the market within the continent and outside of the continent. Digital infrastructures that are being discussed over the period of time here, how we can invest in that. I think this kind of information, and when they're being integrated or they're being used, it will largely impact and increase efficiency in production within Africa.
Okay, yeah. So added to that, so we have heard throughout the day about the importance of, accessing new markets, particularly new markets under the Africa Free Trade Area. And earlier on, with the opening discussion with John, who is trying to enable that to happen more easily with African countries using their own currencies to trade with one another, he mentioned some of the barriers that he could see anecdotally in terms of what was standing in the way of increasing further intra-Africa trade. It was access to markets, it was access to capital, and it was also access to data, amongst the few that he mentioned, although he did say that we've got quite a few problems. In your view, what are the key discussion points around intra-Africa trade and the barriers that need to be removed or unlocked to see a lot more traction in this area?
Good, interesting. When we heard about Africa Continent Free Trade Area and the approach that is being taken at the moment, there are key factors that we need to see basically that can accelerate what we need to do to facilitate intertrade within Africa. One of the key questions that I think or challenge that you've mentioned is the payment and settlement. At the moment, if I'm trading in Tanzania and in Zambia, I have to make within the two countries, we have to make a settlement using US dollars. It becomes one of the key challenges. So inter-Africa payment systems that can happen, or gateway or integration between the different payment systems is actually very crucial. And one of the key issues I think we discussed, this other panelists have discussed, is about how we're making settlements in these payments. How can we use our own local currencies to exchange and to be able to trade and to open the barriers? But also the other points that has to be addressed is on the regulatory frameworks. Still, yeah. Africa, we are talking about free trade area within ourselves, but we still have blocks that have different sort of policies that hinder such kind of facilitation of trade. For example, whatever the East African Community is thinking and the SADC, you might find it very, very, very contradicting in one or another. We have seen the issues of logistics and customs policies or custom policies within member countries within Africa themselves. We are also not aligning to the key milestone that we need to achieve. We need to achieve to the 2030 ambitions of bringing Africa into one trade area in that aspect. So key emphasis should be taken into opening the markets, thinking about borderless strategy and how we can enhance trade facilitation within member countries. I don't see much problem in terms of source of capital at the moment. But what I see, it's a main key issue is how that information are being transformed into the end users that needs to access that market.
Sure.
Yes.
I wonder if the reason why you don't see access to capital at the moment being a challenge is because you're in a room full of bankers with a very heavy balance sheet. But obviously, yeah, I know what you meant in the larger scheme of things. Bob, sir, thanks so much for your patience and bringing you in here. I think everyone is quite aware of the strides that Huawei has made, the significant strides that you've made both globally and here in South Africa. So maybe you can talk to us more specifically about how you see smart energy infrastructure being adapted more on the continent at scale to address some of our energy problems.
First of all, thank you for invitation. I do appreciate it. And come again. You mean the smart AG?
Smart energy infrastructure. So
Energy. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Actually, what we see is, as long the industry, the projects be implemented, the technology evolves. Those, how should I say, the latest technology, the proven ones would automatically be implemented.
Sure.
It's more about how you encourage, how you organize the market environment, and so foster more and more development. That way automatically, of course, everybody wants to use the latest technology to enjoy the benefits, cost savings, better performance, such things. Yeah, so it's more about how you encourage more development. Yeah, and for South Africa market, we see it's quite a active and a major market, and with the government encouragement, obviously with the policies to encourage more and more the renewable power projects, utility projects deployed, and also it's quite surprising and interesting that in this market, the majority of the sponsorship of the projects are coming from the commercial banks.
as opposed to what?
To sponsor those renewable projects.
I hear you. So you say it's quite interesting that the majority of that is coming
Yeah,
from
it's
the commercial
compared
bank.
to other market. It's quite major. The developers, the stakeholders, they don't need to be too much concerned of sourcing funds. As long as it's a good project,
Okay.
the balance sheet is quite nice, so the funds are available. This is quite, how should I say, inspiring. Yeah, and then also you could find out that in this market, there are sufficient professional TA, technical advisor. They can provide a service from the inception to the conclusion of the project. For each stage, they can provide a professional service. So which would allow, no matter you are a traditional existing major IPP developer, or you are just transit from other industry, these TAs would allow you to run a project successfully.
Okay.
Yeah, so with all these conditions, with the government's encouragement, we can see more and more the supplier, like us, OEMs, also the EPCs, the other international developers, they are all focusing, they pay attention to this market and coming.
Sure.
So we can see under this trend, well, the society is going to enjoy the new smart technology as time goes, yeah.
All right, fantastic. And that's fantastic in terms of I suppose, the positive feedback that you are giving about what the South African market is doing or getting right, or relatively more right compared to its peers in the rest of the continent. But the argument that we're making, or the discussion that we're having here, is about how to unlock things further in other markets, such that Huawei can participate more in solving for those solutions. So You said in terms of South Africa, it is an active government. It is an active commercial sector. And it's also, you mentioned technical advisors. So are you saying that with those three or so factors, if they had to be exported to other markets, the same level of participation from Huawei can be achieved? And is there anything else, perhaps, that you'd add to that list?
Well, it's just some ideas. We're not sure, because for different market, different situation, the policies may be different, the demands may be different, the grid environment is also different.
Sure.
So you can't just fit in with 100% the same conditions. Some market, the challenging could be difficult to source funding, but there are some reasons. It's the funding's difficulty there, right? Some risks or what. I'm not professional in that part. And also in some market, there could be the grid is too weak to accommodate the renewables. Yeah, then people have to rely on the traditional gensets or what. Yeah. So,
okay.
To unlock, well, I think most important is maybe I think the banks may need to engage more with the government departments to how should I say, improve the policy support. Yeah, and to, how should I say, it's automatically it's business and also the social welfare. As long as the environment, the policy environment, the grid environment is stable, and there is a space for the developers to make a business there, automatically people will go there for sure. And
Okay.
Some countries, the neighbor countries around South Africa, it's already happening like that, but not everywhere. Yeah, so yeah, roughly it's like that.
No, it's a perfect rough summation, thank you. As I said, with the graveyard shift, there's that one or two very attentive listeners. And in fact, even at 3 o'clock or midnight, sometimes you'll actually have them call in to comment on a particular show. So I just want to know if we are amongst any in the room, in terms of any questions or comments that want to be added at this juncture. You guys are not loyal fans, it's okay. I'm not mad at you, but James has something to say. Go ahead.
I'd like to add something to that, because I think it's important to reflect where we are in the maturity of our energy market development. As we said, we moved very positively coming out of sort of load shedding and with a lot of market reform. Financial close rate on renewable bills peaked end of last year. At the moment, grid constraints, market reform complexity, and what we're seeing is some policy incoherence. If we look at the Eskom pushback on traders and some of the discriminatory actions which are being challenged by NERSA, we're seeing quite a rapid decline in the rate of financial close. So it highlights we've had at this peak. What we don't want is a trough and a kind of downturn in the industry. The renewable industry is growing at the moment probably 30% year on year, and it's had a really aggressive, positive run, creating jobs, a lot of international investment, new builds sort of setting up shop. But what we really do now need to focus on is what you've referenced, is grid connectivity expansion, policy coherence in the launch of the market next year. Otherwise, we will see quite a significant downturn in the renewables business or industry. And that is a concern.
Sure, and I think that this is the area of focus. We heard from the CEO of Eskom a little earlier, and he was talking about, the fact that the National Transmission Company of South Africa is very much aware that they need to put a lot more lines on the soil, as it were, to ensure that the energy-rich areas are able to supply the rest. He made reference to the fact that there's conversations about credit guarantees, and there is an ask for more government participation in terms of the standing as the last corner of protection, as it were. And I'm just interested in your thoughts as to what they are trying to do in their progress. It doesn't seem to sound as though you're as optimistic as I.
So the whole world is trying to expand very rapidly, as referenced earlier. We have good plans around policy frameworks. So I think, as Lungisa mentioned last night, we need action over inertia. It's also action over ambition.
Sure.
So we got plans. It's the implementation is stalling at the moment because it's tough, it's difficult. We're not getting the pace of development or in transmission, expansion. As we launch the market next year, the bankers all need to shift gears. We're moving out of very traditional high debt components in investment, which has been referenced. As we move forward, we need hedges, contracts for difference, guarantees, futures markets. None of those currently exist. So the sustainability of investment in the energy sector, which is fundamental to security, economic growth, positive investor environment, and importantly, in the next 3 years, will Africa be in the AI game or not? We have got a lot of improvements in maturity in the ability to invest at speed and scale. And so particularly, it's the grid, it's the market formation, what goes with that investment, and then I think it comes back to also a well-capacitated regulator and ministry.
Okay, so sticking to the analogy of speed and things stalling and shifting gears, let's talk about what's happening in the EV market, because depending on where you look or depending on whose numbers you look at, there is a bit of stalling and there's a bit of shifting gears. By way of EVs in the African context and the adoption that perhaps is envisioned, we've seen the numbers slow and the uptake being relatively slow. Maybe you can talk to us about that and how you see that picture panning out.
Sure. I think before I get to the South African picture, if you take a step back and look at what's happening globally in the EV space, I mean, Europe or the EU had some very ambitious targets on an EV deadline, and that's all been shifted out now. Global automakers as well, they're starting over the last 6 to 12 months, they're rolling back on this EV strategy. And it's a very fast evolving situation at the moment when it comes to EV vehicles. And back to South Africa, we only have around 1,500 electric, fully electric, BEV, battery electric vehicles in our market. And alongside that, you only have 500 publicly available chargers. And not all 500 are high voltage, direct current, DC, call it fast chargers. So the infrastructure is way behind where we need to be for the supply of vehicles that want to come into the South African market. And then our neighboring countries, the rest of the SADC countries, they are even further behind South Africa. And the other challenge you have is that, I mean, we've spoken about it quite a bit. South Africa has come out of this load shedding phase, this unreliable supply of power that gives customers the uncertainty around not having another solution of mobility if your vehicle cannot charge. And then South Africa or Africa is very different to Europe from a geographical point of view. Our cities are not like European cities that are in close proximity, so it makes your route planning a little bit more difficult. I mean, the technology is evolving quite quickly. The range of a vehicle compared to 3 years ago has now almost tripled, in some cases quadrupled. So it's very quick at the rate the technology is growing, but it's not all bad, right? We've seen some good projects hitting the ground and working quite well. There's a few pilot projects in the urban areas where delivery vehicles and taxis where they have a home base and their range of travel is not very far. The EV strategy works. On some of the corridors we are seeing where there are solar-powered infrastructure being installed, that's starting to head in the right direction. And South Africa has recently created a bit of a tax incentive for new vehicle manufacturers that are building EV to try to incentivize the local production of electric vehicles. But if you had to ask me, I don't believe that 100% electric vehicles is the solution. Electricity will play a part of the solution, but on its own, in isolation, is a challenge. We've seen some automotive OEMs that have taken the stance where it has to be coupled with either ICE, internal combustion engine, or with another source of fuel energy to work together. So in this space, you're saying it's slowing down, yes, but I believe it's because of the uncertainty of what is the future. Battery technology is evolving very quickly, and OEMs and consumers locally haven't been able to find a solution for every South African need.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sure. Don't count on Tesla anytime soon.
No.
Coming to the African market, or perhaps that's for other reasons as well. David, bringing it back to you as we do close out the food security question and discussion in agriculture. What role do you reckon the private sector can play that they're not presently playing in ensuring food security and sustainable, and building sustainable and profitable businesses?
Yeah, I think private sector, we are well positioned to drive innovation. I think that is one of the key issue in terms of improving the entire setup. But the next thing is access to markets. The private sector is well positioned into that space, whereby we can support the entire value chain to open access to the market. So this
regional markets, are you talking about here?
So I think one of the key issues here, we have to discuss, first of all, how we can be able to trade within each other. So regionally, within African perspective, because over a period of years, I've seen it's a lot of inter-trade within Africa ourselves, specifically in agriculture, presumably on the issue of food security. We have tried to also to make sure that we maintain our harvest within ourselves. We have seen that in Zambia. I've seen it now. I mean, last year when we have a huge problem of drought in Malawi, in Zambia, and part of Zimbabwe, whereby most of these countries, what they've tried to do was to try to find ways on how they can use their neighbors within Africa to make sure that we are also fixing the issue of food security. But that is only when the problem happens. But let's discuss about the food security is long term. So we have to see how we are legitimizing this agribusiness into a sector that does not only provide food security within the continent, but will also provide food security out of continent for in other areas where there is a need. And so private sector, the key roles, I said, is to make sure that we take initiatives to drive such kind of initiatives in an area of opening markets, making sure that the farmers are actually producing for ourselves and then can be able to get the markets.
Sure.
But also in terms of technology, we've been discussing today, in terms of value addition, access to storage facilities, core supply chain, equipment, and so forth, and bringing that technology or creating such technology within Africa for the purpose of producing more for ourselves and basically also for the purpose of expansion. Key issue also we can do is, what we are seeing is to support the agribusiness into driving agenda to the policymakers. The private sector now has much bigger role to take in terms of pushing the agenda to the policymakers and regulators, in terms of providing more friendlier regulatory frameworks within Africa. One of the gentlemen today from Botswana, I believe, he said, I think the politicians, one thing at least they should start thinking about is to stop thinking about borders and what works best for us within a specific country.
Wasn't that the president?
Sorry?
Wasn't that the president who said that?
I believe it's the vice
president.
President, yes.
Yep.
Yes, I was very moved by that, because what I'm seeing in so many of the countries where we operate as business people, first thing first is the politicians and who actually they are the one that play a big role into creating regulations and policies. They look at on a closed door. So don't look how that can be able, how we can be able to open the borders and be able to do things that can support our entire African ecosystem on the agri side.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. Point taken. Point taken. Thanks so much. Bob, you have touched on this in terms of PPPs, the relationships and partnerships between the private sector and the public sector in deploying large-scale the green energy infrastructure specifically. So I think in wrapping up this conversation, I'll just ask you more on the private sector and the financiers' role in this regard. What, in your view, are some of the financing innovations that could accelerate project implementation across both rural and urban areas?
Sure. I'm not a I don't have a financial background, so I may give some unprofessional descriptions of the thing. So, yeah. Currently, I mean, let's take South Africa market as an example. Currently, one of the major challenge the developers and the key stakeholders, also including the banks, the investors, are facing is there is a gap between the sponsor, I mean the banks, and also the developer. Why? Because the PPA, I mean the power purchase agreement, sometimes is not a long-term one, which will make the sponsor feel unsecured. But especially in the private sector. Yeah, the government projects, it's quite secured to have over 15 years, 20 years PPA. But in the commercial scenarios, normally 5 years, 7 years is take the majorities. Yeah, that's those for the short-term scenarios. And under such circumstances, the sponsors may feel, well, the project is designed for 20 years, over 20 years. But now it's only have a 7 years, let's say 8 years PPA. What if the demands are not there in the 9th, in the 10th year? How can I secure the money back? That things. Then,
sure.
Yeah. So roughly, currently, one is you have what do you call that? I'm not a professional. Your balance sheet can support. You have that what do you call mortgage thing, right, to support the loan security. Another one is you sign a loan agreement that to allow the sponsor to collect it back within 7 or maximum 10 years time. So they only have risks in 2 or 3 years. So any space for innovation to unlock such the problem, I would say maybe the sponsorship or the banks, or they can take other consultants from the TAs or from a similar role that can provide a very solid sound analysis. Why? Because in this business, the nature is in the commercial, in the private sector, there's no possibility to sign a 20 years, a long-term PPA. So that's the business nature.
Okay.
Yeah, so which means this challenge will exist always.
Okay.
Then why not involve some professional team with, I don't know, through some legal financial guarantees that can, based on their analysis suggestions, then you could make a much more flexible loan agreement to sponsor those private sectors, the short-term PPA scenarios.
Okay.
That we will, I believe, that we will speed up a lot of projects. We learned a lot of projects are on holding or slow down because of such things.
Okay. I think, notwithstanding your caveats, say you're not a professional in banking, I think that those ideas will be deemed as quite interesting ones to take further. So thanks so much for your intervention. So we are, as I said, about to wrap up. Any final thoughts from yourselves as the audience before, or you'll take the final thoughts to the networking session that will be taking place shortly after this? Shall we agree on that? Are you smiling? Is your smile saying yes? Okay, now you're nodding. Okay, I see you. Thank you. So I'm going to give the floor to you, and I think that essentially we are wrapping up the day as well as this discussion. And of course, we are here under the umbrella of unlocking Africa's true potential, resetting the narrative, multi-sector strategies to ensure that we achieve excellence across the energy and the economic stratospheres. If you can leave us with a sentence or two as a takeaway, as what would be, you know, an ingredient that you would add into the overall basket in doing so, it would be what? James, as an Afro enthusiast, just, you know, matched by your tie, sir. Although I see there's a lot of cultures going on in this outfit, but I'm going to take your tie, sir.
Thank you. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to just make a quick reference. The problem that you've stated is exactly why we need markets in Africa. So just in the South African context, we need to spend 2 trillion rand in the next 10 years, 1.3 trillion on new generation technology, 400 billion on transmission, 300 billion on distribution. We can't afford that on the country balance sheet, and the corporates can't afford that on their balance sheets either. That's why we have to have a market. So I think it's a very important point. That is what will give us that speed and scale. So coming back to what to me are really important signals and trends at the moment as a takeaway. Globally, I think we've seen, and we've referenced here, this pullback on the climate change narrative, led really by the US pulling out of the Paris Agreement. EU have pulled back on regulations. And the narrative at the moment is pragmatic and investment focused, and we hear this coming through. I think, you know, as a really interesting example, India have started talking about a green discount. So it's not a green premium, it's a green discount. And the green discount says they will only build wind and solar if it's a discount to fossil fuels. Yet they're second only to China in their rate of global build. I was at the Huawei conference last week with the South Africa CEO. They've got a battery now that can do 1,800 kilometers. The charge rate is under a second per kilometer. So it's innovation and technology is driving things now. It's not this narrative around climate change. We've seen a very direct defunding of lobby groups around climate change. Unfortunately, I think it's going to take a lot out of the research and skills, which is important. I'm less fussed about the lobby per se. But this narrative will change, and I think we've got a window of opportunity as Africa, as South Africa. We've got to be very focused on taking action. We've got to get these fundamentals in place. When the narrative changes again, I think what we'll see is a shift again in global capital. At the moment, there's been a big pullback. The US stop order, pullback in donor funding, lobby groups, that sort of narrative pressure. But that will come back, because at the moment it's just being driven by real practical investment. And what we see, that tipping point in that scale is there globally. But globally, that interest investment in that scale is going to turn and look at Africa, and we need to be ready.
Okay. Be ahead of the curve when that change does happen. Thanks so much, James. James gave us a couple of paragraphs in closing. Feel free to give us a sentence, if you will.
Sure, I'll keep it short. But from an automotive point of view and establishing manufacturing in South Africa, I think the biggest opportunity for us in South Africa still is that our unemployment rate is very high. And incentivizing and bringing these automotive facilities into South Africa is definitely going to help with our unemployment in the long run and building our middle economy in South Africa. And that's, I think, the biggest key from our point of view. And obviously the added benefits that come with it and having these local manufacturing in South Africa is just a bonus.
Yeah. David?
Yeah, my closing remarks will go into the point of saying, let's move with what is happening in the world. Let's put Africa first. And if you're focusing on changing the narratives of Africa and to unlock Africa to its best potential, I think each sector, all sector must create some sort of interoperability. They should be able to talk to each other, from financial sector to manufacturing sector to technology sector and the likes. And let's focus on what works for us first. And we believe in the fact that it should start with us.
Absolutely. So we actually can steal a acronym from the book of the US administration and apply MAGA to ourselves as Africa as well. But Bob, a final word to you, sir, in terms of unlocking Africa's potential in the, from the lens of Huawei, what would you say needs to be done?
Sure. Thank you for that. I would say, even though we mentioned those challenges, difficulties, however, there is a good, South Africa is in a good position, or let's say Africa continent is in a good position that in the power business, other countries like China, Singapore, Australia, UK, they are in, how should I say, 10 years, 1 decade ahead. They already experienced some major issues already. So based on those experiences, we have quite sufficient reference, knowledge, and the new technology developments to address those things. So we are quite confident in this business for this market.
Oh, a wonderful and optimistic note to end. And of course, that's if we use and take the lessons from those who made the mistakes, who had the learnings before us. Many of us were told as young people to not touch the stove because it's hot. And then there was a curiosity to go and touch the stove and get burnt. But I think that it would be about ensuring that, with that call and with the template that they have shown us as to what doesn't work, in believing and not trying to disprove what's already been established. Ladies and gentlemen, with that said, I can officially say that the graveyard shift has come to an end. But I do think it has been an informative one. I think there is a saying that the graveyard is full of some of the best ideas that were never acted upon. Fortunately for us, we shifted the narrative a little bit in ensuring that we communicated these ideas, and it's up to us in terms of going forward to ensure that we implement. But thank you to all of you in the room as well as to the panel. Thank you so much for participating and for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.